We have an incredibly full and really meaningful agenda to cover today. I am Dave Fuhrer, CEO of Grit Health and co-founder of the COVID Advocacy Exchange in partnership with Bristol Myers Squibb. It is an honor to welcome everybody, whether it's your first time, and also to see so many warm and smiling faces with us today. Today's session is a special feature session in the lineup this year, focused on resilience and leading in a reset world. In just a moment, I will have the honor of introducing Ann Powell, who is BMS's Global Head of Human Resources. And as we always do, we have these prep sessions to really focus on the purpose and outcomes we hope to achieve. And I got to ask Ann what is most important to her in her leadership and the work that she does with BMS. And without missing a beat, I wrote it down because Ann said so powerfully, it is about providing flexibility and listening to how we are all trying to lead through times of stress. Ann said it's okay, and please remember to be vulnerable and to talk to each other's hearts as we're all going through this really intense time. And so it is with that really meaningful and wonderful perspective, I hope that we will all give Ann a very warm welcome. Ann, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dave. And it's nice to speak with you again. And I want to say hello to everyone that has joined us today. You know, as Dave mentioned, my name's Ann Powell. I'm the head of Global Human Resources at Bristol Myers Squibb. And I'm super excited and frankly humbled to be here with you today to talk about resilience. I really feel this is the best time to be in healthcare. I think the pace of innovation has never been faster. The potential for breakthroughs has never been higher, and the reward for helping patients has never been greater. As we approach the 1-year anniversary of the launch of this COVID Advocacy Exchange, which in and of itself, I'd say, Dave, is an example of resilience. I'm really in awe of everything that we've accomplished. The COVID Advocacy Exchange was created to connect advocacy organizations, patients, and industry leaders to share information during the pandemic and beyond. And this forum has grown in ways we couldn't have imagined. Together, in the live sessions we've discussed important topics from managing mental health to including the patient voice in everything that we do and everything that we touch. And these conversations have helped us to clarify where we should focus to create positive change for all patient communities. Now we're at a bit of an inflection point because we're moving from conversation to change, and with the creation of new working groups that will shift ideas into action. And that's pretty exciting. We've enabled resource sharing among more than 50 patient advocacy groups at a time when many of us may feel strapped to find and create information and materials to better support all the individuals and organizations that we serve. Now, let me remind you, when the pandemic started, it altered just about everything that we go about doing. It altered everything. And as you're seeing, unfortunately, this isn't going to change dramatically anytime soon. So because of this, the need for balance and an explicit attention to personal well-being, which is near and dear to my heart, it is more important than ever in helping us to mitigate and address burnout as we move through our lives. Let me just quickly share with you a few things we're doing at Bristol Myers Squibb to cultivate resilience. First of all, we're addressing both mental and physical well-being and safety as we emerge from the pandemic and start to think about how we bring our broader workforce back. We're giving people flexibility, and we're prioritizing work that brings the most value for patients. We've also put in place what I would call healthy guardrails between work and home demands. We've introduced global days of rest. Yesterday, we had a global day of rest. The entire company shut down yesterday. We've introduced quiet Friday afternoons, and we're encouraging our workforce to not work evenings and weekends. We're also leveraging our people and business resource groups like Dawn, which is a disability-focused resource group, to bring about innovative solutions such as the Employee Cancer Support Network and the Mental Health Ally Program. So throughout this pandemic, we've seen the power of human connection and resilience. Dave spoke to it in his introduction, and the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And as we learned today, cultivating resilience both personally and in the workplace is one of the keys to our personal well-being. Now, by the end of today's workshop, we'll have an understanding of the science behind resilience and the importance of human connection. We'll learn tips and tools to keep our organizations resilient, and we'll understand the approaches to help maintain personal resilience. Now, let me introduce you to our session leaders from Gagen MacDonald, which is a people-focused consulting firm dedicated to helping organizations navigate the human struggle of change. They have helped leading businesses become more resilient at both an organizational and individual level for over 2 decades. So they know what they're doing, guys. Now, today, their CEO and founder, Maril MacDonald, and Charlene Wheeless, Senior Advisor, as well as Patricia Bayerlein, Executive Director, will be teaching us all about resilience. Now, I realize some of you may have heard of Gagen MacDonald as they're often featured in the news. For example, Charlene was featured recently on the Level Up Latina podcast last January, I guess a few months ago, and she was quoted saying, "Everyone has a story, and when they bring that story to you, to work, and that experience, you get richer for it. It opens your mind." Charlene, I love that quote. This is such a true statement. It's aligned with BMS's values and also the COVID Advocacy Exchange's mission to encourage every voice. So with that, please join me in welcoming Maril, Patricia, and Charlene to the COVID Advocacy Exchange. And Maril, I'll hand the virtual mic over to you.
Thanks, Ian, for that great introduction. And it's so great to be with all of you. We've been a proud partner of BMS for many years, and we were so excited now to partner with the COVID Advocacy Exchange on this webinar. Resilience is such an important topic, and Ian gave so many great examples of what BMS is doing. You know, we have many, many large global clients, and I have to say that and BMS is certainly at the top of the list of the clients that really walk the talk. So again, so great to be here with you. So here's what we're going to cover. We want to, of course, talk about personal resilience, which is so important, but then also talk about how you can lead with resilience. And unsurprisingly, so many personal resilience things start with you. So we're going to go through how we define resilience, how we build it, how we practice it, and then how we lead with it. And many of us are really trying to figure out, how do we really cope with the disruption and all the uncertainty of the past year? And Anne covered much of that. The change fatigue, the societal stress, Zoom fatigue, COVID fatigue. So we want to just share some tips as well to really help you get through this. So we'll do our best to keep the session really practical. We are going to have a couple of breakout groups and some polling so we can get your thoughts and really interaction as well. We're going to start with a definition of really what resilience is, and then we're going to ask Charlene to share her personal story that I think many of you will find very easy to relate to. And then we'll explore how to stay resilient and lead with it. And then we'll have a few polls, as I mentioned, throughout. So let's talk about, why is resilience so important? Well, as we know, the world is constantly changing in so many crazy ways. And we are just running into one crisis after another that just doesn't seem to fit into a precise box or have a neat beginning and end. And I don't have to tell you guys about the impact of COVID for sure, but so many other things have happened in the last year as well. We've seen people feel very lonely and isolated. We see folks really rethinking how they work, where they work, and even what they want to work on. We're seeing women leaving the workforce in droves. We've seen, of course, many very disturbing situations where Black men and women like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd had, so much violence and distress, and we saw the justice and social justice movements really demanding reform. We've also just had the constant barrage of media that has really gotten people so distressed as well. So now more than ever, resilience is absolutely critical. So let's take a look at how we can define resilience. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Patricia.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is really important. As Anne mentioned, that we are a firm that deals with the human struggle of change. So we've been tracking research over many, many years, and we put together, this definition of resilience to really share what we've learned and what we're still exploring, and what all of us, can really keep top of mind for both ourselves and for others. So let's start with the definitions. And it's not surprising that these definitions have also inspired educators and psychologists. And one of the first ways to look at resilience is to think about grit, and really this firmness of character and this connection to a mission that just keeps you going no matter when and how, and if you fail, you can pick yourself up again. But grit is the beginning, and we really think about grit together with resiliency and this idea of elasticity, excuse me, and buoyancy, and that the two are really complementary, that they're both independent, but combined, they lead to a healthy interdependence. And why is that? It's because you need grit and resilience in times when your resilience is disrupted. And it's disrupted by movement. When you're pushed away from your comfort state, you need to build the time and space to recover and rebound. And you also need to think about elasticity. And so you need to stress and flex to absorb the shock. And as you practice ways to do this, which we'll share with you in a framework shortly, you develop ways to grow, learn, and innovate and be creative. So that's why we see this sort of as a superpower or a super competency. So it's not surprising that two psychologists and educators studying both grit and resilience. And the first one that we've been tracking is Angela Duckworth. And she's a prominent psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania. And she studied grit both as an educator and as a psychologist, and wrote a book about it. And she even created a grit scale. Her experience as a teacher led her to seek out what separates those that are the highest achievers from all of the others, and recognized it wasn't intellect alone, that there was some other behavior that was really driving that, and it was grit. And so how does she define it? It's the passion and perseverance for long-term goals. It's displaying effort and not being discouraged by setbacks. So one way to think about grit, is what it's not. It isn't talent, it isn't luck, it isn't how intensely for the moment you want something. Instead, it's about having, what some researchers call this intensity of focus or ultimate concern. It's a goal that you care so much about that it organizes and gives meaning to everything that you do. And so grit is really holding steadfast to that goal, even when you fail, and even when progress is halting or slow. And one other interesting finding that she had is that it's not just your own perseverance of effort, it's surrounding yourself with others or mentors who really are demanding and believe in your capability to succeed. And they demand that from you, and they support you along the way. And building that connection between your own personal grit as well as demanding that sort of coaching from others really helps you build a growth mindset, which leads us to the work of Carol Dweck, who is also an educator and psychologist, and she teaches at Stanford University. And after decades of research, she discovered a simple but groundbreaking idea, the power of mindset. It was so powerful, she wrote a book about it in 2006. And it really is the idea that your mindset it can be fixed or changeable, and that you really think about your ability to grow and develop. And her work shows how success in school, work, sports, the arts, almost every area of human endeavor can be dramatically influenced about how you think about your talent and abilities. And so that's the most important idea I think that we can take away, is that your mindset can be changed. It's the power of believing that you can improve and that effort will make you stronger. So a person with a growth mindset is always looking to embrace new challenges and looking for a path to mastery. You welcome criticism, you find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. You're not jealous of that success. You really want to learn from that success. And you, once again, learn versus compete. But the fixed mindset is the opposite. So you really have to watch out for that. You have to remember that if you have a fixed mindset, there's a tendency to avoid challenges, to give up easily, to see your effort as fruitless. And so you sometimes ignore feedback and you feel threatened by the success of others. So if you think about the fixed mindset, it's always saying, I can't do it. But if you're looking at a point of view from a growth mindset, it just says, I can't do it yet. And with that, we think about growth, both growth mindset and grit really underscores the fact that as humans, we are designed for resilience. And now I'd like to turn it over to Charlene and introduce Charlene Wheeless. And welcome, Charlene. Thank you for joining us today. Charlene is an advisor, speaker, author, and trailblazer. And her compelling personal story shows how she has overcome numerous obstacles, always with grace, humility, transparency, to become an even stronger and more effective leader and advocate. So we're extremely grateful to have her here today to share her story. So I'm going to take down the presentation for a moment so that we can all see each other as Charlene gives her presentation.
What makes you beautiful, what makes you vulnerable makes you beautiful. Brené Brown. Cancer has had a lot to do with who I am today and with who I have become. Through cancer, I've learned to be vulnerable. Therefore, as Brené Brown says in the opening quote, I've learned a new way to be beautiful. People almost always say cancer is a journey. I've said it many times myself, but it isn't until now, nearly 4 years after my diagnosis, that I really and fully understand what that means. It's a journey to a place that is different, sometimes unpleasant, but almost always it leads to a more impactful way of life. Cancer has changed me for the better. I'm in a better place with my life. Going back and reading my blog posts, I see the growth process I was in that I just wasn't aware of at the time. There are 3 blog posts I want to share with you today. To me, they show there is strength in weakness and a courage and resilience that comes from fear, whether that fear springs from challenges, health crises, or career obstacles. I count these 3 blog posts among my favorites because they help me find my way back to myself, and they help me create the life I wanted, the very life I'm living now. July 8th, 2017. Today, I cried. I cried because I have cancer. I cried because my cancer is real. The thing about some people with cancer is that every morning when you wake up, for just a moment, you think, wow, that was surreal. I thought I had cancer. And then you realize it wasn't a dream. The cancer is real. And you start your day. This morning, for the first time, I didn't have that surreal moment of peace. Last night in my dreams, I had cancer. And when I woke up, there was no nanosecond, no moment for me to pretend. The good that will come from this, and I know there will be good, is still so unclear to me right now. I know that God has a plan. It just hasn't yet been revealed. I cried because my hair is falling out in clumps. I know it's just hair, and people always say that it's just hair. But the thing is, most of those people have hair. But there is something more to this. In a way, your hair is part of your identity. It's a part of you. I remember before cancer, I'd walk by a mirror and I would quickly sneak a glance at myself to make sure I looked put together, no spinach in my teeth or something. And then I'd quickly look away. Let's face it, no one really wants to be caught looking at themselves in the mirror. So it's always an attempt at a nonchalant glance. Today, when I walk by a mirror, I stop and I stare because I don't know that person who is looking back at me. I don't recognize her. I look in her eyes and I still see strength, but I also see weakness. Where I used to see stoicism, I see fear, a slight crack in the armor. Where I used to see a fighting spirit, I just see the slightest bit of resignation. But where I used to see resilience, I see greater resilience. That's how I know I'm still me, just different. I'm still here. Today, while I'm in the midst of my own pity party, I turned on the radio and caught a segment of a sermon by Joel Osteen, the pastor. For those of you who know me well, you know I hold 3 men other than God at the top of my most meaningful to my life list. Greg, my husband, Joel Osteen, the pastor, and Darius Rucker, the singer, all for different reasons, of course. I tuned in just in time for Joel to remind me that grieving is part of the healing process. What's that saying of his? Don't let a season of mourning turn into a lifetime of sorrow. What's in my future is greater than what's in my past. That made me smile. My mother used to say that God may not come when you call, but he's always right on time. I suppose that's true. I always hear the word when I least expect it, but when I most need it. Today, as always, Mom was right. God was right on time. I'm headed into my next chemo session, which means I will be more than half done on the 20th, and I can't wait. The last chemo really threw me for a loop. I hadn't expected to be so weak for several days and nauseated every day. My bones ache, and sometimes I can't move. It's a weird feeling. I read somewhere that exercise helps with chemo side effects. Seems counterintuitive, but I figured why not? So I started walking 2 miles a day on my good days. On my bad days, I work hard to walk 1 mile. On my worst days, I stay in bed. I won't set any speed records, but at least I'm trying. I even started going to a Zumba class once a week. It's designed for cancer patients. Most days I make it through, but some days I just watch. I appreciate the camaraderie and support of the ladies in the group. I feel better now, and I'm not sad at all. I did a little retail therapy, online of course. Nothing like buying something you don't need to lift your spirits. A friend gave me a water bottle that says, "Shopping is my favorite cardio." So at least my fingers are getting a workout on the keyboard. Every time I click, add to cart. That's it for now, friends. Be well. Almost a year later, July 2018. I knew I hit rock bottom when I bought a mink coat. I'm depressed. I've been dealing with depression most of my life, so I know it when I see it. My mom had it, and so did her mother. I have some pretty good coping mechanisms, but they aren't working this time. If you watched my video, Why Not, you might have noticed that my right false eyelash was starting to come off. The old me would have reshot that video as many times as necessary to get it perfect. But the new me doesn't really give a shit about a half-glued eyelash today. That's how I know I'm depressed. That's just not me. My goal is always to strive for perfection when it comes to my appearance. Superficial maybe, but I own it. I really dislike fur clothing. Yes, it looks elegant, but fur is not for me. I have been anti-fur for as long as I can remember. I have friends who have gorgeous mink coats, and I don't judge my friends for wearing fur. I just ask them to make sure their fur doesn't touch me. So why is there a mink coat hanging in my closet? When I'm depressed, I shop. It's what I do. Some people eat, some people retreat into themselves. I shop. I had finished cancer treatment already. I had had a great Christmas holiday and spring with my family, and we were all feeling so thankful that I made it through my treatment plan and even a few unexpected and serious complications. I still had reconstruction ahead of me, but hey, a new set of breasts is like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? So why was I down? Cancer started the battle, but I had finished it, hadn't I? Confident a quick trip to the mall would make it all okay, I bought a few things. And as I headed out the door, the first shop caught the corner of my eye, a store I would never be caught walking into. But today I thought, there's no harm in looking or even trying on a few. Other customers in the store were telling me that I looked great. So this was it. A mink coat would brighten my spirits. I teared up when I bought the coat, wondering, what am I doing here? The salesperson thought I was emotional about buying my first one. She said, your first mink is always special. She asked me if I wanted my initials stitched into the inside because that's what people do. I said no, it wasn't necessary. To myself, I said, I wanted no proof that the coat belonged to me. As I gently laid the bag in my trunk, I felt a knot in my stomach. By the time I got in the car, I started mentally reviewing the cost of feel-good purchases I had made that week. I had spent a little over $100,000. I don't have $100,000, and I especially don't have it to throw around. And to top it off, I was still depressed. I still cried. I still felt empty. I went to see a psychiatrist. I expected him to tell me or give me the magic fix. I told him about my spending, that I didn't have much energy or care about much. The hot flashes are killing me, and I wasn't happy. He asked me if spending $100,000 in a week was unusual for me. Isn't it unusual for everyone? I told him I had fantasies of killing myself. He asked me if I ever would, and I said no, my faith prevents me from committing such an act. By the end of the appointment, satisfied I wasn't going to harm myself, he prescribed an antidepressant for the hot flashes and told me not to worry, I would be just fine. After all, I had just kicked cancer. I'm a strong person. I should be thrilled, he said. I smiled and said, of course I am. It was a lie, but it was clearly what he needed to hear. I returned what I could of the things I purchased, which was most everything. I haven't returned the mink coat. It was a final sale. I was speaking to a friend who I met when we were in treatment. She confided in me that she too was feeling off. She finished treatment months before me. Did that mean I had months of depression ahead of me? Were my friend and I unique in our feelings? When people prepare you for your battle with cancer, they're helping you to get the right attitude to fight for your life. But who's helping us after when we don't know what life we're fighting for anymore? Or maybe we're fighting for a life we don't want. I still have that mink coat. I don't know why I haven't sold it or gotten rid of it. Every time I look at it hanging in the closet, I feel badly. Sometimes I try it on and then I feel worse. When I told my 24-year-old daughter about the coat, she's also anti-fur, she looked at me and she said, is it okay that I'm disappointed in you? Those words, excuse me, cut like a knife. Maybe I keep the coat to remind me that in disappointing my kid, I realized I was disappointed in myself for trying to cure something broken inside with something I could only wear on the outside. Just another costume while I hide from the truth. Life after breast cancer sucks. January 13, 2020, dragging my feet. I've been writing this blog post for months. This is unusual for me. It generally takes me an hour to write a post, another hour to marinate on it, and then about 30 minutes to post it. But this one has been harder, different. I had planned to title it How Stella Got Her Groove Back and share the many things I've learned over the past 3 years. Yes, 3 years. The phrase is the title of a book and a movie about a strong Black female, Stella, who comes back stronger after a setback. The title and post is a nod to me being back 100%. But the words just were not coming to me. When I started this blog, I committed to always be authentic and transparent, even if it meant saying things that made me uncomfortable. As I get better, it's harder to be transparent, to lay yourself bare for judgment. It's so much easier to build up walls, but I'm not going to do that. So that requires me to acknowledge that I'm not 100% yet. I thought I was, but then I got sidelined, not by my health, but by the health of others. I know of more than a few people who have recently died from breast cancer, people who were considered survivors. It's sobering. Late last year, I had an appointment with my surgeon in Texas. I was sure he would say, I'm done. He didn't. I was told that 1, maybe 2 more surgeries are needed. That would mean 9 surgeries in 3 years. I wanted to ask God when this would be over, or at least when will I have a day that doesn't include cancer? Rather than listening to my own whining, though, I looked up and I looked out. And I saw women who were bald, eyes sunken, some in wheelchairs, and some not, but all looking as though they were just trying to make it through one more day. I realized that many of those women would probably love to be where I am right now, over the hump of the worst treatments, able to walk on my own and work and do most anything I wanted with less fear. Now, as I write this, I'm in Houston at MD Anderson again, prepping for surgery. It's a lot. I have a lot to say about how I'm returning to myself and lessons I've learned along the way. 1, I have forgiven myself for getting cancer. Intellectually, I know I didn't cause my cancer, but deep down, I think my lifestyle contributed to weakening my immune system. Did I work too much? Carry too much stress? Exercise too little? Internalize my concerns to the point it weakened my body and my immune system? 2, I've accepted the new me, inside and out. Recently, I went to see a cosmetic surgeon to have him take a look at something on my breast I didn't like. He told me he could excise this and stitch that, etc., to fix it. I told him I'd think about it, but at this point, perfection isn't the goal. Living is. 3, I learned to forgive others and approach most situations with empathy. The thing about being sick is that it brings out the best and sometimes the worst in people. I mostly experienced the best 10 times over, but I did see the other side too. There were people who didn't know how to have a friend with cancer, so they didn't come around much. And there were people who knew how to take advantage of people in a weakened state and did for their gain. This hurts the most. The people that betray you because pushing you down helps them rise. To the former, I hold no grudge, no feeling of disappointment, only understanding and hope that we can reconnect. It can be hard having a sick friend. I get it. To the latter, those who took advantage of my weakened state, well, there's a special place in hell for you. 4, I learned that I have a responsibility to myself to choose how I channel my energy, where, how much, and when. I've said it before, time is finite, and I'm thankful for every new day that I have. 5, I've discovered and tapped into things that bring me pure joy. The perfect jalapeno margarita, cuddling with my dogs, driving my car with the top down with the wind in my hair, listening to music, Darius, of course, quiet moments with my husband, loud moments with my adult children as they regale me with stories of how they think they tricked us when they were kids, silly them, and their interesting lives now. 5, I learned that disease isn't fair. I knew that life wasn't fair. Just like my grandmother told my mother decades ago, my mother taught me that life would not be fair for me as a Black female. So I don't expect fairness in most situations. But I thought disease affected all of us in the same way. But then I learned that breast cancer death rates are 40% higher among Black women than white women. Is it because of lesser access to good health care? Maybe. But dozens of studies say it's much more than just that. You know, is there somewhere out there where there's a level playing field for Black women? The question's rhetorical. 6, I learned that I don't know how to smoke pot. Is that even what it's still called? Someone gave me these bud-like things when I was going through chemo, but I didn't know what to do with them. So I Googled how to smoke pot, and YouTube tried to show me the way. After 20 minutes of watching how-to videos, I decided it was easier to just take a nap. At least then, when I woke up, I didn't have the munchies. 7, I stopped wearing bras. It's freeing. I have gorgeous bras, crystals, rhinestones, lace, silk, you name it. But now they stay carefully arranged in several drawers that I never open. It's not like these new breasts are going anywhere. Really, they don't move. 9, I learned that it matters that I'm on this planet. I've made a difference in some areas that really matter to me. I have a purpose. I know that now. And finally, I learned. That's all. I learned. This list has only 9 items, but I'm sure I could come up with 50 more. Cancer taught me a lot in a relatively short period of time. There were some hard lessons, but I learned. Coming full circle, Stella got her groove back, and I'm pretty sure I will too. Today, many, many women are treated for cancer and have little to no problem returning to work or returning to themselves. Not so for me. Within weeks, if not days, it was very clear to me that I was not up to the life I had spent so long building. I felt like a child playing with my Barbie dolls. I'd take heads off one of my Barbie dolls and put it on a different one and then dress them in different clothing, all to achieve whatever was the right balance to accomplish some elusive idea of perfection. Ultimately, I just ended up with many headless Barbie dolls who were missing any myriad of body parts. No matter how hard I tried, it just wasn't right. It was time to pivot. Like my old Barbie dolls, I was out of balance and missing parts of myself. I didn't recognize my old life and accepted that I would never be that pre-cancer version of myself again. Cancer changed me, so I changed my world. I discovered a new purpose and a new passion. I found a new voice, an authentic voice that brings me to you today. And most importantly, after all of my life, career, and health challenges, through the vulnerability of cancer, I gained the strength to become the director of my life. And today, I lean on 2 undisputable truths. 1, I am a child of the Most High God. And 2, I am enough. I am enough. Thank you.
I think Patricia's going to take us from
Yeah, thank you, Charlene, for sharing your story. It just goes to show that what we're talking about in terms of the science can't really compare with the emotion and the depth of sharing your story. Really talking about the symbolic power of the fur coat. We saw that and called out in the chat that is really important to many of us to really think through and address, depression, emotion, feeling, to look up and look out. And really also, forgiving yourself. I think that's another big point that came through that is really powerful in terms of getting the balance back and really connecting to purpose. And so with that, let me go back to our presentation and just explore some of the things that you talked about in terms of resiliency. And, when you're no longer able to change a situation, you're challenged to change yourself. And this is where we feel that resiliency is truly a super competency, and it's important to our growth, our ability to help others, because it gives us the capacity to change and help others change, as we practice it. And it supercharges all of the other competencies that we have and really allows us to retain our gifts under pressure. And this is when our friends, families, teammates, community need us most. And so to share our gifts. So now let's move to the next section where we really talk about building resilience, and we'll build on some of the behaviors and ideas that Charlene shared with us. So Maril, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Patricia. So one of the things that we really want to point out, and I think we got a sense of this from Charlene's story and many of the other comments in the chat, is that we're really designed for resilience. It's really part of our DNA. And I love this quote because it talks about the tiny seed growing into a towering tree, and all about the fact that we just hold unimaginable reserves of strength. So what I want to share with you next is a framework that we've developed that's based on our research on personal resilience and what you can do to develop it. So let's review what we found. And we're going to go through each of these elements as we go forward. If we could have the next slide, please. Thanks. So what we want to do is define each element and then just give you a couple of examples. So connection. We just heard, it's such a powerful story from Charlene, and it was really evident how many of you contributed to the story by really telling us your own in the chat. And connection is so critical to that, and just having the awareness of that need for emotional support and the ability to really access it, and the willingness to seek out feedback and support from a wide range of different sources, including your colleagues and mentors, your family and friends. And it's the capacity to really cultivate a robust sense of belonging and community. Patricia, you want to give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, so some examples are really thinking about, practicing this daily, and you can create a personal statement for how you will connect with people. And then you can post that on your computer, your kitchen door, you can post it on your bathroom mirror, wherever you look daily, to really remind you of the behaviors that drive connection and how you personally practice those. The other idea is to be honest, attentive, empathetic. Charlene touched on that. When you demonstrate these qualities of empathy, it really does forge stronger connections. And finally, helping others out and really learning to track trust in relationships, because trust can ebb and flow. And so having the skills to talk about trust really allows you to build deeper connection. So let's go to our next one, Maril.
Yeah, thanks. The next one is focus. And focus is all about the ability really to identify problems, set goals, and apply solutions so that you can maintain a sense of efficacy in the face of even the most difficult circumstances and outcomes.
Yeah, and so examples of how to practice focus are to eliminate distractions. I know it sounds easy, but sometimes it's hard to do. You can't really get rid of everything that's distracting, but you can make an effort to reduce or as many distractions as possible. And really, if we reflect back on Angela Duckworth's comment on how to focusing on an ultimate concern, a goal that organizes and focuses everything you do, it really helps you build grit and resilience. The other idea is to set a SMART goal. If you really feel overwhelmed by a complex project or a complex issue, breaking it down into smaller parts and plugging that into smaller steps, such as a SMART goal formula, is really helpful. I think the other important one, and Anne mentioned this as part of their resilience practice at BMS, is taking mental breaks. A strategic break can be an amazing boost for your brain, and it can help you focus better. So even a short break can give you that burst of inspiration and creativity, and it allows your mind to reset and restores motivation.
Gratitude is probably one of the greatest components of resiliency. And gratitude, of course, is the quality really of being thankful and the readiness to show appreciation and to return kindnesses. It's looking for things as opportunities. One of the great tips that I learned years ago was how much you can shift your mindset if you think of something as I get to do this instead of I have to do this. I get to go to work, not have to go to work. I get to walk my dog. I don't have to walk my dog. Just that way you phrase things triggers your brain into a sense of gratitude. I get to get my cancer treatment. And any of those really helps in getting through very difficult times.
Yeah, in some ways to practice gratitude is, once again, keep a gratitude journal, just keep track, speaking or writing gratitude to others and to other, to other people. The other thing to emphasize, what Maril was just saying, is really seeing good things as gifts. Thinking of all the good things in your life as a gift that really guards against taking them for granted. And so relishing and savoring those gifts that you've received. The other thing is savoring surprises. Try to record events that were unexpected or surprising, and those tend to elicit stronger levels of gratitude. And then feeling grateful for the little things. We all often remember to feel grateful for big events like graduating from school, getting married, having a baby, but it can be more difficult to feel grateful for the small things we do every day.
Mindfulness, while we're hearing a lot about that these days, huh? And that's really the ability to focus one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting your feelings, thoughts, your bodily sensations, being aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not be overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. And we know mindfulness is one of the things that's easier to talk about than practice. So Patricia, can you give us some
Yeah, it is easier to talk about than practice, especially
Yeah.
if you have a busy mind and you can't imagine sitting in meditation for 5 minutes, never mind an hour. So how do you slow down, really think about bringing attention to daily tasks, everything you do, doing it from that mindful perspective, focused perspective, from doing the dishes to taking a walk to even preparing a meal. I think another important aspect of mindfulness is self-compassion. And Charlene really talked about that and brought that to life for us. And Dr. Kristen Neff, who's a leading expert on the topic, describes it as being warm and understanding toward ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate. Rather than ignoring our pain or self-criticizing, being gentle with yourself when you're confronted with painful experiences, and not getting angry when life falls short of your set ideals.
And of course, there's optimism, that confidence you feel when you believe you'll survive and come through hard times, or a sense of inner buoyancy and engagement with life. And optimism is always a really important factor in balancing it with certain reality. You don't want to be so overly optimistic that you're constantly disappointed, but yet believe that things will work out in the end.
Yeah, optimism is being hopeful about the future, even when the present feels very negative. And so we recognize this today. These are very challenging times to stay energized and upbeat. But there's been some research done by psychologist Robert Baumeister, and he estimated that it takes 4 good things to overcome 1 bad thing. So share good news consistently and celebrate whenever you can, whenever your friends, your team, someone in your community hits an important milestone. The other thing is to be conscious of how you consume all the media in your life and make sure that you're getting the right perspective and that it's not too negative, and treat yourself the same way. Instead of obsessing about negative comments on social media, just scroll down and reread or read again 4 or 5 compliments.
Reflection is also a very critical element. And this is really the ability to notice and really pay attention to how your thoughts are affecting your well-being, either through self-reflection or journaling or artistic expression. It's a way to process and make meaning of one's life experiences, as well as listening to others and accommodating the difference in performance and personality styles.
And I think reflection really helps you look back and examine things. So it's important to really find that time and space to identify the important questions that really help you reflect on your life. What did you achieve and what did you change and what impact did you have? The other way to practice reflection is to take a walk in nature, write in a journal, as Maril mentioned, read, track your feelings. These are just a few ways you can build time for reflection in your life.
Self-regulation is one of my favorites, and I think one of the hardest things to do. And it's really one of the 5 elements of emotional intelligence that psychologist Daniel Goleman wrote a lot about. It's the ability to return to a calm state after feeling upset or emotional, and to think through the possible consequences of actions. It's the ability like to switch off and refresh.
Yeah, and I think by practicing this element, you'll be better able to respond to situations and also, better understand the emotions other people are experiencing. And so if you practice self-awareness, which helps with self-regulation, you really know your strengths and weaknesses. You can identify what makes you angry or feel negative. What is it about other people's behaviors that triggers anger or, an upset emotional state. So you can make a list of those triggers and replace them with positive alternatives. You can also take a deep breath. You can set healthy boundaries, and you can monitor self-talk. And our final one is wellness.
It's wellness, right. Thanks, Patricia. And of course, we heard Ian talk about that at the top of this presentation. And wellness is so absolutely critical as the discipline of taking care of your physical and emotional health to keep up positive energy and stamina. And of course, we want wellness on many levels: physical wellness, mental wellness, financial wellness, the whole broad aspect, because each one of those things impacts the other.
And some examples are, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, eating well, exercising. Those really contribute to your well-being.
And one thing I just want to note on all of this is you think about everyone on this call today, and you think about the importance of resilience. I just want to share something I learned many, many years ago from a guy named Jim Lair, and he ran the Human Performance Institute. And Jim was a coach for Olympic athletes. And he went from coaching Olympic athletes to coaching organizational leaders. And why did he do it? Well, what he said to me is, that he came to recognize that Olympic athletes train for a few years, they perform for a few seconds or minutes, and that's how their success is measured. Corporate athletes, basically we train for like 40 years and we perform for 40 years. And, we've been hearing how overworked and overstressed everyone is. And he came to realize that people who work in organizations have a more grueling and difficult role than an Olympic athlete. So he wrote a book called Mentally Tough that was all about how, he's written several books since, but how you really need to balance your physical, emotional, and spiritual state to really perform. And it's still a great book. The book is probably now 20 years old, but I'd recommend it to anybody. Mentally Tough by Jim Lair.
Okay, thanks, Maril. Now we're going to do a few quick polls. Let's look at the first one. Which element is the most important for you to practice to stay resilient? We'll give it a few seconds as you vote. So it looks like gratitude is the most important to practice to stay resilient. So followed by mindfulness. And then I think wellness and connection. So thank you for that. That's a reminder that we need to practice gratitude, I think more often. So we have another poll around the elements, and which element is the most challenging for you to master? So now that we know we want to practice gratitude, which one is the most challenging for you to master? I'm going to share the results. So it looks like self-regulation. So this is interesting. In all of the sessions we've done in the last 6 months, this one has always come to the top of the list. And your second one looks like focus, followed by wellness. So we encourage you to think about the tips and practice all of these when you can. So now I think we're going to move to a breakout. Let's see where we are. So we're going to move to a breakout session, and we're going to post the handout in the chat. And what we want to do is have a short conversation around, it's a very simple framework about how you can think about all these different elements of creating your own personal resilience plan. And it's based on an exercise in positivepsychology.com, and you'll see the link at the bottom. So you can take this further if you'd like to post-session. But there's really 4 questions that you can reflect on and jot down a few ideas for each box. So let's go through each one. And I think Charlene's going to help me on this with giving the definitions, and then I'll give you some examples of what you can what you can think about. And then we're going to talk about and share ideas in our break. And I believe that we have the handout shared in the chat. So if you don't see the handout in the chat, please take a picture of the screen. So our first one is support, and really thinking about who the supportive people are in your life, who can keep you standing when it would be easier to fall down. So that, for example, is calling an old friend, asking a colleague or parent or teacher for advice, talking to a mentor, seeking out advice from your community. The next one is strategies, really reflecting and capturing any strategies or actions you would use to help yourself cope with negative thoughts and stay optimistic. So some examples here are meditation, keeping a gratitude journal, walking with friends. Third box is sagacity. And what wisdom or insight do you hold on to that really gives you comfort and hope? So some examples that people have shared here are song lyrics, novels, poetry, spiritual writings, sayings of one's grandparents, sharing learnings from your own experience. And then finally, solutions. What behaviors can you really think about putting into action to actively deal with the challenge? So for example, problem solving, seeking out the facts and relevant information to an issue, planning ahead, negotiating, really speaking up and voicing your opinion, and something simple as asking others for help. So now we're going to go to our breakouts, and hopefully you have downloaded the handout from the chat. And if not, please take a picture of the screen, because you'll see the exercise on the side. We want you to reflect on the questions and jot down a few ideas, and then take turns sharing your ideas, and then capture anything you'd like to share in the group discussion. We've reserved a few minutes after the breakout to call out some insights and ideas.
I'll just add, as we're wrapping up, Eileen Shannon, who's the newest member of our team, said this morning on a call, "I've never met so many heroes." And I think that comment embodies everyone here and how much everyone cares and is compassionate. That conversation was for our next session on April 8th, which is to honor National Minority Health Month and to showcase people that are doing really impactful work addressing gaps in healthcare. So we would love all of you to join us on April 8th at noon for the next session. And I can't thank the Gagen MacDonald and the BMS teams enough for just how much heart and thought has gone into this session. Thank you all so much.